For our project, we decided to focus on foster youth, specifically foster youth who are aging out of the system. And we decided to use the TF-CBT, which is trauma-focused cognitive behavior therapy. And in my group, we have Cynthia, Haley, LBJ, and myself. Okay, through no fault of their own, many foster youth grow up feeling alone, and they struggle to imagine a hopeful future. These children grow up without positive role models and healthy influences that young people need to reach their potential. For the 26,000 young people across the world who are transitioning out of foster care into young adulthood, the future is perilous and uncertain. Without the support from families to guide them through school and teach them life skills, they are too often fall prey to homelessness, unemployment, and poverty. Okay, so here are some of the facts about foster youth, and nearly half, about 47.9% of youth in foster care were determined to have clinically significant emotional or behavioral problems. Children in foster care struggle to cope with the events that brought them into the system, such as caretaker abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, neglect, parental substance abuse, community violence, instability, natural, that can be damaging to the child's development and make it hard for them to trust others. Okay, and there are some more facts here, and it says unmet mental health needs for foster children can mean ongoing problems as youth in foster care enter adulthood. Over half of foster care alumni had diagnoses compared to 22% of the comparison group. And this is a huge one that we saw that we were pretty amazed by, and it says that a rate of PTSD was nearly double the rate of PTSD found in combat vets. Okay, next. Okay, so what needs do they have once they age out of the system? We found that housing, many of them are left homeless, education is another one, employment, and the need for mental health care. And last, help with substance abuse. And here are the outcomes. So I'm just going to pretty much read out the big numbers here. 58% of foster youth experience homelessness, and 99% will never graduate from college. And for employment, we have 71% of unemployment.
PTSD from that occurring. The next one says right here, essentially that of people treated, it also says that if used within 2 to 3 weeks of onset, it will prevent onset of the trauma, it will prevent PTSD from ever occurring. The next one says right here, essentially that of people treated with PTSD, young people, 1/3 had positive results in just 3 to 6 weeks. Lastly, it speaks that TF-CBT is more effective than supportive counseling for treatment of PTSD. And this last article mentions that how effective it is for use with young people, and the last part of the article talks about that clinicians also for use with young people, and the last part of the article talks about that clinicians all over the world should rejoice that now there is a method for treating young people with PTSD. Well, I hope so far that we have convinced you to some degree to consider using trauma-focused cognitive therapy for treating PTSD young people, and hopefully you use it. Thank you for your time.
I'm going to talk about why we chose TF-CBT, trauma-focused cognitive behavior therapy, as an intervention for foster youth, specifically in late adolescence. So, why is therapy important, first of all, for foster youth? Well, foster youth face a lot of trauma, often complex traumas, where they develop blunted affect and a lack of full range of vocabulary. Most of these problems occur in school-aged youth, also high school, and can behavior, and it affects functioning, placement stability, and permanence. So 25% of trauma-exposed children develop significant symptoms of PTSD, which we kind of talked about and heard from LBJ, and increases risks for other psychiatric and medical conditions, foster youth in particular, and as well as mental health issues. And so, you know, as the rates of this is higher, the more maladaptive behaviors occur when they age out of the system, the foster care system. So, TF-CBT is actually a unique form. It's different from CBT because it's specifically designed for children who have faced trauma. It's also effective if the child has faced multiple traumas. And then its biggest evidence base is from PTSD situations. TF-CBT reinforces education about childhood trauma. It reinforces emotional education as well as emotion regulation skills. Connects thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that are related to the trauma, and then it also focuses on reinforces education about childhood trauma. It reinforces emotional education as well as emotion regulation skills. Connects thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that are related to the traumas. And then a really unique aspect of TF-CBT is this thing that's called the trauma narrative, and you'll see us do that later. So really, when you break it down, it's 1/3 is focusing on coping skills, another third is the trauma narrative and processing, and then the last chunk is treatment, closure, and consolidation. It's appropriate for children ages 3 through 18. It aims to involve the parents or the guardian or the foster caregiver as well, both separately and together. That's not always realistic, but usually that's the goal. And then an important finding is that children who received only 11 sessions of TF-CBT have significantly reduced PTSD symptoms, and so that's why we chose this one. Next up is Cynthia to learn about how to implement TF-CBT.
Okay. So the logistics behind CBT are, they include the therapist, the client, and the guardian. It's mainly focused on therapist and client and the process that the client goes through. The guardian joins in just to provide some background information on what they have experienced with the client or what they have seen the client go through, just so that therapists can get more background information. The sessions for process of the trauma narrative are the clinician and client. The therapist coaches the client, but it's the client that writes their own narrative and that expresses their own process doing this type of intervention. The therapist provides psychoeducation on the narrative. Basically, that's the consent for the client. They explain what it is, will look like, what the end product will be, and the outcome. And they can also the therapist conducts an assessment that is called PTSD Index for DSM-4. And that's an in-depth assessment that only a trained professional can do. And only a trained professional can interpret the results and determine how severe the trauma is that the client has experienced. The trauma screening ideally should include a full array of traumas, including child abuse, domestic violence, accidents, injuries, medical procedures, illnesses, and any natural or human disasters that the client has lived through. When the screening process identifies a trauma history, a more in-depth assessment of trauma, there are a number of domains, concepts to consider when also doing this assessment, which include anxiety, behavior, PTSD, prenatal symptoms, and also the parental support or guardian support that the client has at the moment. The duration of the sessions should typically be between 10 and 12 sessions max. It's a short-term type of thing. And the length of each session should be between 1 and 1.5 hours. And this includes the beginning process, the client writing it down, and then the therapist going after each, towards the end of the session with the client and see what the process was, what feelings it brought out, and what's to continue for the next on. The therapist does, like I said, an informed consent with, before the start of the narrative. And the therapist describes what the process is, the outcomes, and what will be done. At the end of the entire session, before termination, the therapist will conduct an assessment, the one that was done in the beginning again, and this should prove that the narrative worked and that the symptoms and the behaviors should have gone down significantly, and the client should be able to retell their trauma without breaking down, which is probably what they did during the beginning. Now, let's see TF-CBT we put a use, and what will follow will be